Thanks, Scott. We're going to take a pause in our normal programming here and introduce Commissioner Steve Grove with the Department of Employment and Economic Development. As you know, the governor was slated to be with us. He gets to be with President Biden instead, but they were all very gracious to coordinate an appearance by Commissioner Grove, who has had an eventful tenure as deed commissioner and probably doing a lot of things he did not expect to be doing at this point in his time with state government. So we're going to hear from him and kind of what's in the offing here. So Commissioner Grove, it's all you.
Great. Thanks, Bradley. Hello, everybody. Good to see you all. Well, the governor sends his regrets, obviously, over in Wisconsin with the president, but I'm really happy to be here and thrilled to speak on his behalf and on behalf of our administration at a really unique time in our state's economy. And I have to say, it's refreshing to see you all in person. I see so many familiar faces out there, but I'm used to seeing them, in a little box on a screen. So it's just great to be in person again and to see the pandemic receding at this moment in Minnesota. It's just great for our economy, great for small businesses, and really great for growth. So it's wonderful to see you all. Thanks for coming in together today. I think it's a moment where, as we think about our own challenges and opportunities in the state, it's impossible not to ignore what's happening over in Europe right now and in the Ukraine. I know all of our hearts go out to the people there as we watch the destruction unfold, and we're just praying for peace right now. And it just kind of puts into perspective so much of the work that we're doing here when there's crisis like that around the world. So it's good to see you all. I'm excited you've come together today to talk about this session. It is a historic session, and this is a historic moment for our state's economy. We have gone through a tremendous amount of challenge over the last couple of years across the state, and we've weathered it, I think, as best we possibly could. But just to kind of remind ourselves of what we've all been through, we lost 420,000 jobs in 1 month back in 2020. It's still sort of stunning to me to remember that we lost that many jobs so quickly, as every state did on those early days of the pandemic. We're about 77% back on the road to recovery in terms of those jobs being recovered. But when you think about the fact that 1 in 5 Minnesotans was on the unemployment insurance system over the past couple of years, most of whom never expected in their lives to be faced with such a challenge, this was a pandemic that really affected so many people. And we are proud at our agency to be a part of that recovery. Our employment insurance system put about $14 billion into the pockets of Minnesotans to help get us through that challenge. And today we've seen some of those things start to fade and other challenges accelerate. And I know you're hearing about so many of the same issues that I am and we are at DEED. We have a record number of job vacancies in the state right now, 205,000 job vacancies. People often ask me, are there enough people in the state to cover the jobs that are open right now? And the answer is actually no. We have about 0.6 people searching for every 1 job opening in Minnesota. And so we know workforce is a major challenge. And we know, of course, that the pandemic accelerated the disparities in our economy significantly. The income gaps between whites and people of color have only widened. And some of the other disparities that have long stood in our economy have gotten all the more challenging. So as we've kind of headed into this session and thought about, what should the governor's budget, what should our funding in government be focused on, we're looking at trying to help those who've been most hurt from the pandemic and help the businesses that are trying to recover in this moment succeed as best as they possibly can. And so while it is a moment of challenge, there's a lot of opportunity out there. And I'll share some of the components that we see as momentous and highlight a couple of different budget priorities that I think are relevant to this group and would love to hear your thoughts too. I'll say that it is rare in a state's history to face such unique and pressing and disruptive challenges and also have a lot of resources to tackle them. I mean, a $9.25 billion budget surplus is a pretty extraordinary thing. And how we use it, how we navigate these next few months as a state at a time when you have that historic opportunity, I think is going to influence the next few decades of our economy. It really will. And we are hopeful and optimistic that even in an election year, and even when there's maybe some disagreements about components of the budget, we can do things together in a bipartisan way, especially on the economic development and workforce side, where the challenges aren't political at all. They're just challenges to get some good things done this session. So the governor and our team have a lot on our radar that I think is relevant to this room. I'll tick through a few of those things and then talk a bit about where we go from here too, because I think that's important. First, and you saw this immediately as we released our budget, we are laser focused on getting our unemployment insurance trust fund taken care of. This deficit of about $1.29 billion as of, I think, last night when I looked at it, and growing by the day, is a pretty big threat to the stability of our system. And we know that it will increase taxes for small businesses if we don't pay it off. Now, there are some mechanisms that would do that naturally, but when you have this kind of a surplus and you have small businesses that are still trying to recover from the pandemic, taking care of that early, getting it done by March 15th, which is, 13 days from now, to avoid that tax increase is really, really challenging. So I would say anything you all can do to reach out to your legislators, specifically on the Jobs Committee, to move forward on that piece in particular. We can do that early and focus on other issues later, but that's a big one for us to make sure that small businesses aren't hit with those taxes. And again, this system took care of so many workers, 1 in 5 in Minnesota, and really performed better than I think any state's unemployment insurance system in the country. We need to get it back on a strong footing and make sure we're in a good place there. So that's a major area of focus that I think is just the most timely given that March 15th deadline. The second is broadband. I don't have to tell a coalition of greater Minnesota cities how important this is. You've been advocating for that long before I had this job, so you understand how important it is. But I think what's unique about this legislative session is that when you look at the federal money coming in and you look at the grants that we've applied for additionally, and you start to do the math, like what would it actually take to get this job done? You can figure it out. There's a number out there that you need to ensure that if we put some state money in, we'd get enough federal money and we could connect the 240,000 houses in our state that aren't yet connected. And the magic number is $170 million of this surplus, if put towards broadband, could connect the entire state to high-speed internet. This is critical for health, for education, for small business growth. It's critical for talent attraction, people wanting to live in any place they'd like to across the state. We really think Minnesota can be the kind of model of a state where you can live in any pocket of the state and still participate in the global economy in whatever way that you'd like. And we're only going to get there if we invest in it. And this is the kind of historic one-time funding, one-time moment where we could put ourselves on a path to finish the job. We happen to have a really great Office of Broadband at DEED, started by my predecessor several years ago, that has been really the model for so many other states who've tried to figure out how to get grant dollars into communities. And we know that we can get this money moving quickly if we can designate it to that task. So we're very focused on broadband as just one of those big ideas where it's exciting to kind of be within the sights of saying we could get this done and to have that surplus to tackle it. So major area of focus for us there, and just a big part of economic development. The other area is just small business and innovation. We have seen over the past year, small business starts increased by about 40% in Minnesota. Now, you always see more small businesses start during a recession or an economic challenge. But of course, this one's unique because the stock market's still soaring. There are other opportunities out there, but there's just a lot of disruption in the economy. And there's lots of pockets and windows where entrepreneurs, small business owners say, hey, I could do that, or I could do that. And of course, the entire economy had a moment to step back and ask ourselves kind of the collective question, what's a good job in today's economy? What's a good opportunity in a moment where people kind of rethink what they're doing? And so that frothiness, that new business starts, and the new business starts that we're seeing is a huge opportunity for Minnesota to build the next Fortune 500s and big companies that can create jobs in our state. And that's been our history as a state. We're kind of a homegrown company state and a state that has done that well, but we've got to invest. And I'll tell you, we feel more competition from our bordering states and from other states around the country than we've ever felt. Because the labor market is so fluid right now, because people are rethinking where they live and how they work, we've got to have an aggressive stance here on small business growth. So we have some money in our budget focused on growing our Launch Minnesota program, which is an award-winning program that we started just 3 years ago to help small high-tech startups grow. This money would help fund an accelerator that would advance those startups' ability to help scale up in Minnesota. One of the trend lines here is that small businesses will oftentimes come to Minnesota to professionalize and grow talent because of our talent market, but we don't really have a warm handoff to help them do that, or the kind of technical assistance and guidance that would help them there. So we have a big focus on that. Another big focus on the angel tax credit. This is a really wonderful tool to encourage venture capitalists to invest in Minnesota, whether they're here or not. And in fact, often it incentivizes venture capitalists outside of Minnesota to look here rather than other states. But that tax incentive only exists when we fight for it. It's not an always on tool. We need to just get it in the base of our state's budget and make it a dependable tool that entrepreneurs can lean on. It vastly increases the amount of other capital we can get into the market. It's just one of those force multipliers where you get a little bit of a tax credit in there and boom, you get a lot of other private investment flowing behind it. So we're really bullish on that too. And we're also really bullish on the state small business credit initiative. This is $100 million coming in from the federal government to Minnesota to help grow our economy. And we can use it to help those businesses that might otherwise be able to just waltz into a bank and get a bank loan. And this is a program we're excited about. We need to do a couple of policy changes this legislative session to make it work for Minnesota. So you'll see that on the radar. But this is money that can go directly to the hands of small businesses to help them grow. You know, I'll return to the theme of workforce just because I know it's on everyone's mind when you're thinking about our economy. You know, we do face this sort of stunning workforce shortage in our state, and it spans the spectrum. On the governor's budget, it's not just DEED, of course, that focuses on workforce, though we're the primary workforce agency. We have a lot of components around on our caring professions and our healthcare workforce that DHS is carrying. The Department of Labor is focused a lot on the trades. At DEED, we're trying to focus on where the highest growth, highest wage jobs are across the state. And one of those spaces is technology and technology jobs. They pay about twice the average of a typical job in the state, and they're growing twice as fast. But our pipeline is in rough shape. And I'll just give you an example of this. When you look at AP computer science examinations in high schools as just one kind of indicator of how well we're doing, Minnesota ranks dead last. So 50th out of 50 states and the number of high school students that take the AP computer science examination. 50th. I mean, this is a state that prides itself on being about top 5 in just about anything you can think of. And we're last place in that indicator. We have got to accelerate our technology workforce pipeline and make sure that companies across Minnesota have those workers. And I'm not just talking about like tech companies, that are just tech companies for the sake of technology, but any company within which there's a technology job, which frankly is just about every company today. So we have $15 million in our budget focused on youth workforce training for technology. We have another $13 million for reskilling, so helping people that are maybe in the middle of their career or ready to shift jobs, get the kind of training they would need to do that. This is important because it is actually hard to shift jobs during a challenging moment. The comfort and familiarity of an existing job is always a little more warm. So as we call thousands of people proactively every week on the phone on our employment insurance system, telling them and showing them where the opportunity is, we want to help them pursue jobs in industries where there's opportunity, but sometimes they need a little bit of training. So that funding is really important as well. And we're also leaning forward on clean tech, where you look at sort of green jobs in our state and this existential economic threat, frankly, that climate change brings to us all. We need to have the workers that can build the solar panels, weatherize the buildings, build electronic vehicle charging stations that are going to be a huge part of the next wave of our economy. We don't want out-of-state businesses coming in and doing that for us. We're going to do that here, but we have to train the workers to be able to do that. So we've got about $8 million in our budget for that. The other component of growing our workforce is, of course, making sure that new Americans in our state can find jobs and connected jobs across Minnesota. And we have an office for new Americans in DEED right now, led by our Assistant Commissioner, Anissa Haji Mumin, who's a wonderful leader. She's being funded by a grant program right now. We just kind of tied this together with a shoestring and brought her in the door and got it off and running. But we need to make this office an always-on effort so that companies across Minnesota who might not have a connection to immigrant communities of labor and labor pools have that kind of workforce connection with Indeed to make those pipelines really strong. And so we're asking for some funding to help ensure that office can continue ongoing into the future. So that's really important. I will mention, as Scott did a moment ago, that our state's infrastructure programs are critical. This coalition has been great over the years in advocating for BDPI, as well as IDPI and TEDI. We have $7 million, $4 million, and $1 million for those programs, respectively. Encourage you to advocate for more if you think more is needed, but those are the numbers we kind of could fit into the broader picture. The demand there is strong, and particularly BDPI, which is entirely focused on Greater Minnesota, as you know, is just a wonderful program. It's exactly what government should do, which is provide the infrastructure to help businesses do what they do best, which is grow. And you all see where the need is. It's real. So those are some of the things I wanted to highlight. There's other themes that we have in our budget that are focused on Greater Minnesota, but those are the ones I think maybe most relevant. And then you have just the ongoing efforts of what our agency is focused on right now at this unique, critical inflection point. There are several programs from the last session and ongoing programs that we're really dedicating a lot of attention to right now, given the intense need. One of them is helping our main streets rebound. And we passed a program last session called the Main Street Economic Revitalization Program, which you may have seen, $80 million focused on kind of clusters or corridors of business. This both meets the needs of the metro for some of the corridors that were damaged by the civil unrest in 2020, but also main streets across Minnesota and greater Minnesota that really took a hit from foot traffic and business closures and COVID concerns and health challenges over the past couple of years. This current round, the application of which just closed, I think, on Monday around 4 p.m., is going to be heavily greater Minnesota focused because the ultimate sort of mix of funding has to meet certain criteria. So we expect to see a lot more greater Minnesota projects there. It's a really important program that we're really committed to getting right. And I think just recognizing that main streets are kind of the lifeblood of our towns and cities, we need to invest in them. And there's a lot of work there where you get kind of a multiplier effect, if you will, if you focus on a corridor rather than just one business. We are also very focused on childcare. I heard Scott mention that a moment ago. This is a broken market. I mean, the Secretary of Treasury, Janet Yellen, will say the same thing, has said the same thing. It doesn't work. The economics don't work. You can't pay workers enough to cover their costs and still keep prices at a level for which customers can afford the service. So it's a perfect thing the government has to lean into right now. So we are in the middle of issuing forward a record amount of childcare money from DEED on economic development for our grant program. We issued about $2.5 million last year. We have another round coming up soon. This program just helps new businesses get started. It funds these businesses directly to get up and running. It provides thousands of seats every year. We can get it rolling. But again, the gap is 90,000 total across the state. So I'm sure you're hearing about this every single day from businesses and workers in your communities. It's literally holding our workforce back. And so we need more help there. We got a lot of in the budget around this from the perspective of DHS, where you're trying to subsidize this a little bit on the payer side too, to make it a bit more affordable, but that's a key priority as well. And then, I'll mention the PFA just because Public Facilities Authority does a lot in greater Minnesota. As DEED Commissioner, I'm a chair of that authority, and we've just awarded over $180 million to about 26 different Minnesota cities to improve water service and infrastructure. That remains just a key priority for us. There's still communities in the state that don't have access to basic clean water, and PFA dollars help make that happen. So that's something we want to be continued to focus on. And I guess, I think just bigger picture in terms of where we're at as a state right now, this is really an inflection point. It is truly a moment of competition, but also a lot of opportunity. And while I think that oftentimes in Minnesota, we're pretty humble about our state and we don't maybe trumpet our success or our greatness as often as we should, we have absolutely no reason to be humble about Minnesota. When you look at the kind of state that we have, from natural resources to our corporate clusters, to our business opportunities, to the fact that if you start a business in Minnesota, you have a better chance of being around 5 years from now than any other state in the country. That's a fact. That's a documented fact. We think there's a lot to be bullish about, but we don't often enough go out there and tell our story to the world. We don't go out and pitch Minnesota. And I'll say, as somebody who grew up here, I grew up in Northfield, left the state about 25 years ago, and then came back just 3 years ago. I came back and was like, man, Minnesota really is an incredible place to grow and build and have a family, but we just don't share that with the rest of the world often enough, and certainly not with other businesses. And who does? Our competing states, our bordering states. They pour millions of dollars into marketing for talent, for business, for growth, and we do not. When I walked into DEED, I said, hey, where's our marketing budget, guys? And they all just kind of chuckled, like, we don't have a marketing budget. And I was sort of shocked. I was like, how could an economic development agency not have a marketing budget when every other state around us does, and they're running commercials on our airwaves and putting ads on our Talon's Instagram feeds to say, come to our state and build your jobs here. We can't be complacent. We can't be the kind of state that lets other states eat our lunch, especially at a time when you can go anywhere that you'd like to grow and build your job, given the growth of telework and just the way people are rethinking their lives. So we do have in our budget $5 million to get ourselves started on a marketing budget. Many of you may have seen the new platform that we launched last fall at joinusmn.com. We did this in partnership with a lot of regional marketing organizations across the state, many of which you might be familiar with. It's a great site. It's kind of the front door of Minnesota, if you will. It describes all the incentives that we have for businesses. It makes a unique argument for talent, which is something DEED has not really gone into in the past. We haven't really focused on talent attraction, but to ignore it now is at our own peril. And so we really feel passionate about this. The governor has been out there on trade missions with us and in other venues really pushing it. We have to be bold about this moment. We can still be Minnesota humble. We don't have to not be who we are, but you can't be at the table if you haven't even paid your ticket to get in. And that is really marketing and getting out there. So we think the good news about this is that the story that we can tell about Minnesota is a great story. And we know that most people who've looked at our state over the past couple of years have done through the international media and the lens of all that followed the killing of George Floyd. And we deserve scrutiny and attention, and we can be honest about the journey that we're on as a state and talk about the things that business and government community are doing to make this more equitable state. But that doesn't preclude us from also saying this is a great place to live. It's a great place to grow a business. And even if we have disagreements inside the family on the key components of doing that internally in Minnesota, from an external standpoint, I think we can all hold hands and say, hey, come and live and grow and build your business here and do it in greater Minnesota, which has some of the best resources, best people, best infrastructure, best highway system, and best leaders of any state in the country. So we're bullish on that. We're bullish on the state. I'll just say there's an optimism inside of our department. We're grateful to work with leaders like you at a time when the moment really calls for great leadership. You know, Bradley, you're right. None of us expected the last 2 years when we're doing the roles that we do across the state. But, you know, I can say I am grateful to be in a state where people come together, where leaders like you can gather and advocate for the kind of policies that can make sure Minnesota is writing the next chapter of our global economy rather than just being a subject in it. So we're aggressive about Minnesota. We're assertive. We're bullish about where we're headed. This session is a huge opportunity. It's really kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so you all coming together to advocate for policies that will make greater Minnesota in particular a dynamic and growing place to be is so important. So I appreciate the chance to talk to you all today. Again, Governor says in his regards, thank you for everything that you're doing and for making Minnesota great places for business, people and families. Thanks, everybody.
Well, as you can hear and see, DEED is up to an awful lot. And, you know, from our perspective, they're one of our favorite agencies to work with. They're thoughtful, smart, on top of it people. And I think that's due to the work that Commissioner Grove and all his staff do. So what we are going to do is take a break. You can grab lunch in the back. There are sandwiches, there's vegetarian options for Ash Wednesday. If you do need a gluten-free option, there are a couple on the table out front set aside. So we'll grab some lunch, and we've got our legislative panel here in about 15-20 minutes. So time to take a little breather.